I'm Ann Farrell. This is Madison Soelling, and we're going to talk to you today about breaking up is hard to do. This was a workshop or session that Pizza Today actually called me and said, "Hey, will you do a session on this? This is one of our most requested topics. People really struggle with how do you let go of employees? It's so difficult." And I said, "Wow, like that is so difficult." And sure, I'll help out with that. It got marketed as how to break up with your guests, which we wouldn't have 9 restaurants if it was about breaking up with your guests, most likely. Anyway, so a little bit about myself. My family owns Farrell's Pizza. We have 8 pizza restaurants, and we have a Irish pub called McNamara's Pub and Eatery. We've been doing business since the early 80s. We've had several different concepts along the way. Farrell's has been our most successful concept. I had kids early. I have 3 daughters. Madison is one of those daughters. And so we got to use the same pictures for our intro. That's my whole big working family there. All 3 of my girls and then their husbands all met at Farrell's. And so it is this big, vibrant working family. We have obviously, like all working families, our ups and downs, but mostly ups. I studied human health and behavior, East and West psychology, and then I went on to get a master's in organizational and leadership development because that was the part of the business that I love most, was people, building really healthy teams and building really healthy leaders, people that inspire great people to make great pizza, which is one of our taglines. Maddie, do you want to come up and say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I do not have a master's degree, but I do feel like I have a degree at Farrell's University, what my grandpa says. I've been working for my family since I was 12. So almost 20 years now. And I have 3 sons. I met my husband working at Farrell's, like my mom said. I have worked as a host, a busser, a bartender, a cocktailer. I've been a general manager. And then I became a district manager. And after I had my 3rd son, it was time for me to kind of take a little bit of a step back. So I just recently, the last 7 months, have been working building our HR department. So my title is HR Generalist, but it's really new for me and I'm learning. So I'm kind of emerging myself in education in Washington State. When I get home, I'll do an employment law conference there, but I'm just in this new role and learning. So this is a fun experience. I was a little nervous about today. My mom said the best way to learn is to teach. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. And this is an example of how our company grows from within. And I sort of worked myself out of a job. I'm doing leadership consulting now. So Align and Unify to Thrive is my company because that's what I was able to do with Farrell's and what I want to do with other organizations and teams, which is align people around a common goal, their mission, their values. Once they're aligned, they unify. And once they're aligned and unified, they thrive without a doubt every time it works. And so that's sort of my passion and where I'm headed. As far as breaking up is hard to do conversation, here's the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. We have 90 minutes, which is 30 minutes longer than a lot of the sessions. And so what we want to do is break it up into about a half an hour of talking about like key communication strategies so that hopefully you don't have to break up with your employees, that you are able to build really good, healthy teams and give them the coaching they need so that they can become, high performers. And then we're going to talk about if that doesn't work, then we have to go to letting people go, and then what's the compliance issues that you need to be concerned about with that, and then how do you have that difficult conversation? So that'll be the second half hour, and then the third half hour we're hoping that we could just open it up and have a conversation about what issues are you all dealing with, and maybe as sort of the collective wisdom in the room, we can figure out good ways to help you solve some of your situations that you've got. So that's where we're going to go this morning. The disclaimer is that the first one, it's not about breaking up with your customers, although, we do have some experience with rowdy customers that we've had to handle. And so afterwards, if you want to talk to us about that, we're happy to talk to you about that. We are not HR experts. We're not attorneys. Everything we do, though, we vet with our HR attorney, and we always do our due diligence to stay compliant and legal. But I think it's just important to know, like, we are not the end all be all. One thing that's interesting is that in this business, even though you don't have an HR department, we are all in HR. We're all onboarding. We're all giving orientation. We're all making sure that there's no harassment going on in the workplace. We're doing organizational development. We're doing training. So everybody in this room is also, one of the other hats you wear is an HR professional. So that's kind of the little disclaimer about that. So the first thing I think to acknowledge is that breaking up is hard to do. Terminating employees is so uncomfortable, so awkward, so much not fun. And one of the things that when I first became a general manager, I was probably 28 or something like that. And Jackie had already been, my sister, who's the CEO of Farrell's, had been running the first Farrell's for a couple of years. And she said, I'm just going to give you one piece of advice, Anne. She said, make sure that before you terminate any employee, that you've given them all the training, all the tools, all the feedback that you need to have given them so that you can look them in the eye and be confident that they earned their termination. And that was, that made me rest easy, because I know I am that person. I am going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and what they need to be successful. So that was kind of the main thrust of this presentation, probably, is that idea of allowing people to earn their own terminations through their behavior and choices, not because they didn't have the tools to be successful and it just didn't work out. So hire great people. That's your number one, easiest, best bet to not have to terminate people, is to hire really good ones, give them the tools and training so that they can do a fantastic job for you. Have really good job descriptions. Make sure that the expectations are crystal clear and that they know exactly what you expect from them, and then inspect what you expect from them so that you're holding them accountable and they're holding themselves accountable. We have a saying at Farrell's, and that saying is, what you permit, you promote. So if the standard is that you come to work in your uniform looking clean and sharp and ready to give great service or ready to make great pizzas, and you don't, and we don't call you out on that, then we're basically saying our uniform standard doesn't mean anything and you can come to work dressed however you want. So what you permit, you promote. The other thing that we talk about all the time is that people need, and most people want, nonstop, unemotional feedback, which is just information. It's not my judgment on you. You are either late or you are on time. You're either in uniform or you're out of uniform. You either raised your voice across the line or you didn't raise your voice across the line. I'm just giving you feedback about what I heard, and I'm reminding you of what our standards are. So I think we get very caught up in I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, or, what will happen? And me, back in my early days of being a general manager, it was so hard. I hated hurting people's feelings, but I would be very resentful and upset when people didn't live up to the expectations that we set. And so I actually went to school and spent like $60,000 on a master's degree so I could learn how to give good feedback. Kind of expensive, so save everybody some money. And then when you set these really good expectations and these standards, and you're building this culture of excellence and accountability, know that peer pressure begins to be how your team holds each other and themselves accountable. So you wouldn't ever think to coming to work without your uniform looking great. You wouldn't think to not pull your hair back. You wouldn't think to be rude across the line, because we've created the conditions that hold each other accountable. So I don't have to, as a manager or leader, be giving that difficult feedback, because now everybody's doing it for and with each other. And then also recognizing and celebrating good work. When I think we're always about giving critical feedback, but as or more important than giving critical, timely feedback is giving praise and saying thank you and good job, and really recognizing great effort. And also, this is kind of a conversation. So if I'm saying something and you're like, wait, go ahead and ask a question. And the reason that we do all of these things is because we have this so what bridge. So we build this culture of excellence so that when you need to terminate an employee, you feel confident you did everything you possibly could do to ensure their success, but they were just not a good fit and they earned their termination. And really, when you've done those things, breaking up is not hard to do. It's usually obvious. And when you call that person in for a conversation, they usually know what's going to happen. And usually you don't need to say any more, and you don't want to say any more than it's just not a good fit. We're letting you go. And you don't want to say too much more than that because you said everything you needed to say as you were coaching them up. This is really important. And this is something that for many years, as leaders in our company, we didn't think we had time to do this. Document, document, document. It is so important. And today with a lot of the online tools that you can get, we use People Matter for our hiring, our onboarding. It's a scheduling tool. I know we switched scheduling tools just recently. So, but it's all of those things. And right in there is a place that every day at the end of your management shift, you can just write, here's the things that happened today. And you want to be documenting. It's not a formal write-up. It's just so-and-so was late today. It's time-stamped. It's dated. It's legal if you need to terminate somebody. So we always, go ahead. What's that? People matter. And you'll see a bunch of them down on the showroom floor, and I would talk to them, talk to People Matter, talk to Talent Reef. And they're very affordable for the time, money they save, and for the legal hassles and things like that. It's invaluable. So accountability, if it's everybody's job, it's nobody's job. So that's one of those common things that happen in work. We get frustrated and so doesn't do their side work and so, so do you have clear roles and responsibilities? Does everybody know what they do to contribute to the healthy functioning of the whole team? You should have, and everybody should know what everybody's responsibilities are. The host should know what the general manager is doing. There's a pattern of management. You place it on the GM's door and you know that, oh, they've been working on these activities all day. They worked from 9 till 6, so they're not here tonight. But the supervisor is, and their job is to be walking the circle and, where are they? And the host is responsible to seat the guests and pre-bus the tables and, so that everybody knows the value that everybody contributes, and that without each role, the whole thing can fall apart. Communication is such a big deal, and teaching, especially emerging leaders at Farrell's, we really grow from within. So almost every single person who's in leadership in our company started out as a dishwasher or a host, including me. And so that means if you're growing from within and you're starting when you're 18 to 25 years old, lots of times it's a first job, and you become really good at being a server, you become really good at being a pizza maker. The skills to be a leader, as probably all of you know, are completely different skills, and they're not easy skills to learn. And if you haven't, grown up with really healthy conversation and communication skills modeled for you, then you don't know how to do that. And so making sure that your people have some access to some kind of training, or getting some kind of training even for yourselves on how do you engage in difficult conversations? How do you not take it personally and not get overly emotional? So this is some of the stuff that we teach our team members as they're emerging into leadership, which is, tell the truth, cultivate genuine curiosity. So actively listen, and then communicate what you're intending to communicate. And then you only know if that message was received if you asked, tell me what you heard me say. And then also being able to paraphrase what you hear others say. Oh, here's what I'm hearing. So like, for example, somebody's been late 3 days in a row. I would say, hey, I noticed that you've been late the last 3 days. What's going on? There's no judgment in there. I'm just curious what's going on. Oh, my car broke down and I'm having to, catch an Uber or whatever it is. I'm like, oh, that your car broke down. That must be really hard and very stressful. Yeah, it is hard and stressful. Okay, well, you understand that the standard is that you have to be to work in uniform on the floor, checked in, at your end time? Yeah, I do know. Okay, so what can we do to help you? So we have this conversation that's much more about supporting that person, understanding that person. They feel heard and seen and know that I'm not going to let them skate and be late. And, and then I document that conversation. What did you hear? Oh, I heard that you see that I'm not coming to work on time. Okay, so the other thing is being really good about feedback and evaluation so that people know where they stand. This is my dad and our system, our director of kitchen systems, Mike. We were on retreat a few years ago, and we have all these our language of Farrelli's, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So we're always making sure as leaders that people know how much we care about them. And one of the ways that we show we care about them is by giving them the feedback, both the good and the bad. Feedback should never be a surprise. Critical feedback should be given as close to real time. If somebody made you mad a week ago and you tell them a week later, that you lose a lot of energy and you also lose a lot of trust, because what if he's continued on? Now he knows you've been mad at him for a week and you didn't tell him. So as close to real time as possible, like right after shift is a great time. How often should you give general feedback? I think every day. I think you should be checking in when somebody comes to work. Hey, how's it going? 2-minute check-in. How's your day? You'll be able to tell if they're stressed out, if they're feeling good. And then at the end of their shift, hey, how did your night go? What went well? What didn't go well? What can we do to improve tomorrow? And this way, this person knows, oh my God, they care, I matter. And formal evaluations, once a quarter, something like that, where you sit down for 15, 20 minutes and really talk about how they're doing and what their performance is and what you want their growth plan to be. This is an awesome model. It can be a little intimidating, and it can also be misinterpreted. So I want to be careful about how I describe it. This is called radical candor, and it's a tool that we use when we have to give difficult feedback. And it's an easy way to describe, especially to emerging leaders or people who have trouble with conflict, on how you can give difficult information to people. And the quadrant, the up arrow, is that I really care about you personally. So high is I care about you a lot. On the bottom is I don't care about you really at all. The one going, is it horizontally? Challenge directly. So on the far left side, it's I don't challenge you at all. And on the far edge is I'm very direct and I challenge you right to your face. So the quadrants are ruinous empathy. So this is a person who cares a lot but doesn't challenge at all. So this is more like, if you've got spinach on your tooth and I don't tell you have spinach on your tooth because it's embarrassing. I don't want you to feel weird, and I don't want to feel weird telling you something weird, and so I just don't say anything. Manipulative insincerity is that passive aggressive, where I know you've got spinach on your tooth and now I'm telling a bunch of other people and we're kind of like snickering about it, and it's just sort of mean spirited and passive aggressive. Maddie and I were talking today, and I said, what's an example? I want to give a better example of passive aggressive. And I thought, I have one of my own. Back when I was that new manager, and people would come into work and they wouldn't look sharp, and I had made it very clear that's a big deal in our company. Come to work looking professional. The first thing people are looking for in your restaurant is cleanliness. If it's not clean, now they're looking for everything else that isn't right, and that includes people. So be well groomed, look nice, be clean. And they would come into work with a wrinkly shirt, and I'd just be like, I'm so mad. And then I'd go downstairs, because we had this office downstairs, and I'd just like vent to somebody about it. And then I'd come upstairs and I just wouldn't talk to them for the rest of the shift. So they had no idea the impact that they were having on me. And maybe I'd start giving them less shifts, but I didn't just have the direct conversation that said, hey, like earlier, get in your uniform. Then you have obnoxious aggression, and that's just like, oh my God, you look like crap today. What were you thinking? That's just, not helpful. Puts people on the defense, especially service people that you need to be nice all day long. You don't want to say anything mean and hurt their feelings. So I think this far top right, radical candor, where I care about you a lot, and I'm going to be direct, is like, so you come to work and your hair is supposed to be pulled back. It's like, hey, your hair looks awesome. And here's a rubber band because we pull it back here at Farrell's. Don't come in without your hair up again. Don't have your hair up next time. So it's just like, it's quick, it's unemotional. She knows her hair looks awesome down and that I really like that hairstyle, but not here at work. Anybody have any questions about radical candor? Yes.
How long did it take you personally to go from, I'm going to kill this person, and I need to run downstairs and vent my frustration?
Yeah.
I'm completely deadpan, almost non-emotional, just spitting out information as if it's information. How long did that road?
Yeah, well, and it's never not. I'm very emotional, heart-centered, passionate person, so it's always emotional. But I would say, as soon as I understood, after I got education and invested in learning about this, that it was unfair to the whole team, to all of my guests, to everybody else, for me not to say it. My job as leader is to hold people accountable to do their best. And if I let somebody continually come into work late, if I let somebody underperform, I am letting down my team and I'm letting down my guests. So as soon as it turned around, like I'm not doing my job by not telling the truth to people in a way that is kind. And that's what I love about this, is that they know I care about them. So it didn't take that long once I understood the impact of not doing it.
So you said how you had a time frame until you started kind of learning how to handle it better.
Mm-hmm.
How did your team, how long did it take them to start better absorbing that more critical challenges, even though you were good-hearted trying to better them?
Right. I think, Maddie, why don't you answer that? And it's being recorded, so she has to get up and come and talk in front of the microphone. But I think Maddie could talk to that better, because I don't know how long it takes for them to start doing it. I mean, I can see through coaching books that they're doing the work, but I don't know how long it takes them to feel comfortable.
For the employees or
for you, as you're learning how to give critical feedback?
Well, I actually have a story. So when I became a general manager, I was 23 years old, and I had a really good friend of mine working with me as my assistant manager. And I was, I guess, maybe in the manipulative insincerity, or maybe ruinous empathy. I don't know. I had a hard time giving critical feedback to him because I cared about him as a friend, and he wasn't doing a good job, and I didn't tell him, but I was making these mental notes in my head every time something didn't happen. And so I ended up demoting him and taking him out of the role, and it ruined our friendship. And he was so shocked. And I was like, why is he so shocked? He hasn't been, he's late. He wasn't doing the tasks that I asked him to do. And then, that was the learning curve for me. I think being direct and honest with your crew is an immediate result. I think if you take that on as a leader and you give that feedback to people, I think that they're going to respond really well. I know for me personally, whenever I've received critical feedback, I've been really appreciative of it. And I think that's how people grow and get better. So I think it's immediate once you take the ownership and start doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're used to being passive aggressive and they want to work in a passive aggressive environment. And I think that when people embark on this journey, sometimes when they encounter that, they back off and they regress. But you have to kind of keep pushing through that and kind of get rid of those people.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's just like the journey to go from 0 to 100 has tribulations along the way that you have to.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's not easy giving critical feedback. I still think it's hard. But yeah, you had a question there?
So, if you have an employee who is really good at what he or she does, but like you said, comes out not groomed properly, the shirt's not ironed, and no matter how much I try to tell them, it's not sinking in. It's not. I mean, I've told them very nicely several times, but I don't want to let him go. What do we do in such situations?
One of the things that I always do, especially like if you need to have like a serious sit down, is I always say, and this is on the slide somewhere coming up, but self-evaluation first. So I say, hey, I want to sit down today and let's talk about performance or uniform stuff. And I need to know what you think you're doing really well. I want to know what your challenges are and where you need more support. And I want to know what your goals are. And let's make a plan. And so that, one, you're not surprising. And my worst thing anybody can ever say to me is, hey, do you have a minute? We could talk a little later. And I'm like, what'd I do wrong? And so like, take that like anxiety out of it and just say, this is what I want to talk about. And I need you to come prepared. And then, I mean, that will tell, if they come prepared, then they're probably somebody who wants to keep their job. And almost every time, like I don't have any examples. Well, actually I do. Of a time when people don't know that they're underperforming or screwing up in some way. And so that they can tell you what those shortcomings are. And then boom, you just get to do problem solving. Okay, what's the plan? What should accountability look like? Like next time you come and you're not looking good, I'm going to send you home. Is that fair? And then when they come, like we had a girl several years ago that was, our uniform is, dark denim jeans and black non-slip shoes. And she was wearing yoga pants and Uggs. It's like, this is not the uniform. And it doesn't look good. And she came into work and it was kind of sucked because it was a snowy day. And so she had struggled to get to work in her yoga pants and Uggs, and she got sent home and she was furious. But, it's like, we agreed this was the consequence. So, and she didn't stay working with us for very much longer because then it was just, kind of that, what we'll talk about, the progressive discipline. Oh, yes.
Just real quick, it's kind of the same vein this gentleman was talking about, but I feel like you're kind of towing the line with some employees between obnoxious, aggressive, and radical candor, like in their eyes. In that situation, how do you really handle, like in the direct situation where you're actually talking to them, how do you handle someone taking your radical candor as being aggressive and singling them out?
Well, I think you can tell if you have a relationship and somebody knows that you care about them or not. And in our industry, especially like across the line on a Friday night when it's super busy and, voices or tone can be offensive and you're like, I'm just using radical candor, which people in the beginning with us and maybe even sometimes still do use a radical candor. It's like, no, you're an obnoxious aggressive. That is not radical candor because I don't know you care about me. But then, you have a conversation at the end of the night and you apologize. We always say apologize, own it, and make it right. And so that's the conversation that happens. And then, I don't know if anybody reads Brene Brown, but she's all about leading with vulnerability and just being real. It's like, I'm curious. Do you know that I care? That I'm hard on you because I care about the mission of our organization, or because I see your potential and I want you to do really well, or because your job's on the line right now and I don't want to lose you because I think you're a great person. That we have permission to do that. Any other thoughts before we shift? The radical candor, if you want to know more about it, there are so many videos online, YouTube. That author shows you what it looks like and talks about it. Kim Scott is her name. And so this is the book that she wrote and great stories. And it's a great, easy, understandable model. If you want. So real-time feedback is the most powerful feedback in the moment. Like I'll stand at the edge of the dining room and people are working and I'll see a server not pre-bus or not do a full sweep through a section. And if this is what we're working on today, it'll be just like, hey, can you head back and, do a spin through your section and grab all your empty plates. Or on the pizza line, hey, I noticed you didn't weigh the cheese. Can you do that one over again and weigh the cheese this time? So that you're giving that feedback instantly, and that they can make those changes and adjustments right away. Be genuine, be curious, be positive, that whole I care. Be behaviorally specific. Sometimes when we talk to people, it's more judgment. You're disorganized versus is a judgment versus I noticed that when you came to work, you didn't have your pens, your apron wasn't on, your shoes were untied. The judgment is you look disheveled, you seem to be disorganized, but more you're pointing out what specific behaviors you're seeing, being curious about that, and they can tell you what's going on. Okay, we talked about the self-evaluations and giving people the chance to tell you how they think they're doing, how important that is. And then this formal versus informal feedback. Here's our formula is tell me 3 great things you're doing or proud of, or your strengths, 3 things that you're working on or struggling with, and then what are your goals? But if all that stuff doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't, and they just aren't a good fit and they earned their termination, how do you stay compliant and help them preserve a sense of dignity and keep your stress levels down too? So I'm going to let Maddie take over now.
Do I just click this?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So they didn't work out after you give them all the feedback. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on compliance and termination. So I did a little bit of research before I came here about Washington State is an at-will state, and most states are, but there are a couple that you need just cause. And I think it's best practice to document, and have just cause for firing somebody. But an at-will state means that you can fire anyone for any reason at any time. There is, however, loopholes to that. So, for instance, if the employee perceives it to be a retaliatory act, if there's discrimination involved, anything like that can get you into hot water. So that's why documentation is so important. If somebody's late for work, or they're not in their uniform, or they have an off day, it's not like a formal write-up that you need to write up, but just documenting along the way when you're having issues with an employee, so that when you come to the point where you've made the decision you want to terminate them, you are being compliant with your state laws. Have a plan and an escape plan. It's kind of funny. But just having a plan when you're going to terminate somebody, like my mom said, when you call somebody and you're like, hey, I need you to come in earlier. Hey, I need to talk to you. That just creates a ton of anxiety for that employee. I think the better call is, when they come in for a shift, pull them aside in an area that's, it's kind of a fine line. You don't want to do it in a closed office door. You can get into a situation where the employee wants to argue with you, or, they feel like they can get loud because it's in a private area. You also don't want to do it publicly to humiliate them. But if you can find a place in your restaurant that's kind of like a neutral ground, so that you can have a conversation that could become emotional, in a place that's safe for you and for the employee. I think one of the things that kind of I learned throughout the way in terminating people, because I've had to terminate quite a few, is that it's not a coaching conversation. In that moment, who you're firing, it's an emotional thing for them. The moment you say, we've decided to let you go, they're not going to hear anything else you're saying. So that's why all of the slides leading up to this, we wanted to communicate that it's so important to have those coaching conversations along the way, that when you sit down to terminate an employee, they've earned their termination. You should feel good that you can look them in the eye and say, you're no longer a good fit, but it's not the time to say it was because you didn't wear your, it's not the time to be having coaching. And then also, it's super important, to have a witness present. I think that every single time you terminate somebody, you should have a witness present, somebody who can have your back, who can kind of help the situation out. And then if there were any legal ramifications after the termination, you have somebody who can kind of, I always I can't say that word, cooperate. I say it wrong every single time. So that's kind of the compliance of the termination thing. The at-will state, and kind of, we just wanted to show an example of what's in our handbook. I think it's really important to have an employee handbook. If you don't, you should definitely reach out to a local HR professional or attorney in your state. So we talk about the code of conduct at Farrell's. Which is, you must show up on time, looking professional and ready to perform your role as assigned. You must be kind and respectful, and you must be honest and competent. And then we call out the behaviors that would earn you a termination. And, insubordination, cell phone, theft, negligence, all of these things that you don't want going on in your workplace. Do you guys need another minute with that slide? Everybody good?
I've got this on my website, so you can have a copy of the slideshow. AlignUnifyThrive.com. AlignUnifyThrive.com.
do you mean by triangulation?
Triangulation is kind of like a vicious gossip triangle. So it's when person A talks to person B about person C. So A, B, C. And instead of giving, like we're talking about direct feedback, say, Erica, I'll just use that name. Erica shows up late for work and I walk over to Anne and I'm like, Erica was late for work today. It's so annoying. She's always late, blah, blah, blah. Versus going directly to Erica and saying, hey, you were late for work today. What's up? So it's a little model that we use.
Oh my God, you should have seen so-and-so on Saturday night. This is all the crazy stuff they did. And then it spreads throughout the restaurant and everybody's talking bad about one person. And we say it's like cancer in our restaurants,
And if we catch you triangulating, we go like this. We've done that before. Okay. And any other questions before I move on to the next one? I thought I had some. No, we're good. Okay. And so this is also in our handbook. So progressive discipline. So we kind of have this, we highlight what we ideally would always want to do 5 steps to the door before we terminate. We give you a friendly reminder, we give you a verbal warning, we give you a written warning, and then suspension, and final would be termination. That being said, we also have a disclaimer in our handbook that says that Farrell's may, in its sole discretion, impose discipline less than termination. However, Farrell specifically reserves the right to skip any and all forms of lesser discipline before terminating a crew member, depending on its own determination of the seriousness of a particular situation. And that's kind of just keeping us safe and compliant with the at-will state. And again, I can't recommend enough having an employee handbook and having it looked over by an HR professional or attorney in your state. All right, next one. So I've talked a little bit, so I feel like I'm being a little bit redundant, but about kind of the loopholes of being an at-will state, that if somebody feels harassed or discriminated, that can get you into really hot water. So it's really important. I know in my personal career, when I was a district manager, I had an employee, it was a kind of a crazy situation, but she came to me and she said that she had been sexually harassed by one of our prep cooks. And it was the first time in my career that anyone had come to me and said this. So of course
It's the first time in the history of our company.
Yeah. And so I took everything she said, and was very kind and comforting to her. And then, took her side of the story and immediately reached out to our attorney and just asked them kind of advice, like, what do you do in this situation? And in our handbook, it states that we would do an investigation. So that's what we did. We did a in-house investigation of what had happened. And it was crazy. It ended up turning out, one of the situations where they're dating, they have a relationship. And so, but the bottom line is it came down to, now we have an employee who made this complaint against another employee, and she doesn't feel comfortable working with this guy anymore. And we're lucky that we have several locations and that we were able to transfer her out. But in that situation, it came down to, we couldn't say anything.
Fire either one.
We couldn't fire either one. Yeah, because it turned out to be kind of a false complaint, but at the same time, she had made a complaint. So letting her go would have been a retaliatory act, and that would have gotten us in hot water legally. Yes.
So if you utilize an attorney or a consultant in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
kind of guide you through.
Yeah.
This attorney, she's an HR attorney, and she helped us make sure that our handbook was compliant. We didn't have a handbook the first 10 years or something that we did business. And then you kind of find out, whoa, you're really opening yourself up to a lot of legal trouble if you don't have one. So we got one, asked the attorney to look it over. She went through and made sure that we had everything we needed, like the this and that slide. Like, you have, if you're going to do discipline and you don't have that disclaimer and you terminate someone and you didn't follow this thing that you said you were going to follow, you're liable. Go ahead.
I had a quick question about that. So before starting the process of working with one, do you have a guideline for when you call your consultant in or when you handle it in-house? Like, do you have a list of kind of, like, is harassment always call a consultant?
I don't think we'd call, like if that same situation happened, because we'd never dealt with it before, we wanted to make sure we handled it with, like the utmost respect and not, and it especially was tricky, like they had all of these text message exchanges and the person accused of sexual harassment, screenshotted and sent us all, like we were in a relationship and I didn't know that I was overstepping my boundaries. Of course, that kind of behavior in your workplace just isn't okay. So there was that issue of a write-up. But you can't retaliate by terminating her for a false allegation. And you can't terminate him because he didn't really do anything wrong. Plus, he had been with us for like 8 years and was an awesome cook and had never had a complaint or anything before. So we ended up transferring her, and she wanted to be transferred. I think what you do if you have a single store is that you can not schedule them shifts together. But then, if one's full time and one's part time, it just gets really, really tricky.
Did you update your handbook after that? So there was no dating between employees or what?
No,
We have a little section about that, but like I said, I met my husband working at Farrell. So you in the restaurant. Yeah, I have a question back there.
When you're doing like HR investigations as an operator, is there anything to follow, like any kind of questions?
One thing that really stuck out in my mind, because when somebody makes a complaint like that, they want it to remain like as private as possible. And the verbiage that the attorney that said to me that stuck with me was to tell the employee that you promise to use discretion, but that you have to talk about it with the people. If you're investigating something, you have to talk about it with people. You can be discreet, but you can't promise confidentiality in a situation like that. Yeah, they actually provided, I feel like she provided us with like a list of questions, but I can't remember exactly.
Well, you can't ask any questions that talk about, obviously, anything on the discrimination side, but mostly you're just getting their story. Just give me the narrative. And so you're copying down each person's narrative that you're talking to. And you're also asking that with the narrative, like, don't give me your judgments. Tell me exactly what you saw. It's almost like a cop or a detective writing a report. And my husband is a police officer, and it's just the facts. Don't ad-lib, don't tell me what you think happened, only what you saw. So that's probably the most important part.
Yeah.
Have you run into a situation, and this happened to me, I have 2 locations for the restaurant, and a direct manager started dating somebody right below. So she was direct manager, and she was officially dating this person.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it started to create, conflicts of interest, because she's about same level, and to a point, that's sometimes inevitable, and it happens. They see each other a lot, but he's not the boss or she's not the boss. But this was different.
Mm-hmm.
Have you come across that ever at your company, and how were you able to solve it if they actually created a problem?
Right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have a policy that if you begin dating, that you cannot be direct. Yes. Yeah, that's our policy.
Had to terminate. It was a little bit of an issue because she, she respects the job, and it was okay. And he ended up, we ended up terminating him, but it created a little bit of,
Yes. Yes.
And I had my other manager, they started dating somebody because she was dating, so it was.
Oh, yeah. I know how that goes. But yeah, so it is our policy that if you're dating, you can't be a direct manager of the person that you're dating. Yeah.
So what do you do if an employee comes in, they file a complaint, they tell you about it, but then the next day they say, you know what, I actually would just like to drop it. I think it got too in my head for that day, and I don't think it's that big of a deal, but you already heard it. What do you do then?
You want to answer that one, Mom?
Well, it would depend on if I opened the investigation. If I immediately went to the other person, because those kinds of allegations are big. You're calling into question somebody's integrity. If that kind of thing's happening in your restaurant, you're liable if somebody else gets harassed or whatever. So it's kind of too late. Once you've started the process, we have to follow the process through.
I also wanted to say earlier when we were talking about documentation, as simple as if you don't have like a system where, like we have an online system where you have employee profiles online, you can add notes to their account, but you can send yourself an email with their name and the subject that's, you know, time and date stamped. If you don't have a system that does it, it can be as easy. And again, it's really important, like what she was just saying about not putting in any judgments or anything like that. It's just the facts, like so-and-so was late for work to say so-and-so skipped out on their shift 30 minutes early or whatever. Yeah.
I might have a little bit of a unique situation, and we actually have an issue with customers, but I have an employee who feels that we're not doing enough to protect from customers. We have a late night crowd, you know, open past 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an employee that basically has been, you know, in that late night crowd, doesn't like how sometimes customers talk to them, and they come to us and is like, you're not doing enough to protect us from the customers. Is that a situation maybe talking to an HR, the consultant or the lawyer, and kind of saying, what, like, we do have bouncers, but we actually have some time to just say, like, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like we're being harassed by customers, and it's kind of because of the clientele after a certain hours.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one.
We found ourselves in a tough situation because our hours have been extended, and so we've seen it more recently. So it's kind of really tough.
Yeah, how I would answer that question, it's a values-based question, right? What's important to you? What do you value? So what's okay with you and what's not okay, and where do you draw the line? And like for us, I know we had a situation that's similar in one of our locations. A girl felt totally objectified in one of our stores. The guy was really disrespectful, had been drinking, and we did ask him to leave and that he was not welcome back. We don't use the term 86 because if you 86 somebody and they come back in a year later, which happened with us, I mean, all the lessons we've learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a crazy guy. He was violent, and he was 86 from our restaurant. Well, a year and a half later, he came back in, but the bartender didn't know who he was. He was a newer bartender. He was belligerent. He was drunk. He harassed a woman. Another clientele like tried to intervene and protect, you know, that gal, and he got beat up, and we were held liable because that person had been 86, known 86, and we let him back in. So you have to be really careful about that. And then in the other instance, that girl, she still felt uncomfortable in that store, and so we transferred her to another store.
Back to your system,
Uh-huh.
something you came up with in-house, you bought it, or
No, it's called People Matter. It was our scheduling tool and our onboarding tool. And so, yeah, all of our employees have their individual profiles, and you can attach notes to their file.
Happy morning, bro.
Ah, thank you.
What'd you say?
Stop Tuesday.
Happy morning, bro.
Oh, heck yeah. I can't wait to party after this. This is my like really intense speaking engagement. My mom, we had a little tiff last night. I was having a great time at dinner, and she told me to lay off the wine. She said, I need your brain power. But tonight, I'm going to have fun tonight. What?
So kind of a similar situation in them where you can't really control the customers. We deliver pizza, and we deliver to a trucker's lounge, and my delivery drivers, they deal with catcalling all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is it kind of the same thing with just values? Basically, what I tell them, right or wrong, I say, hey, if they're talking to you like that, you're your own person. You can defend yourself when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And if they call and say, hey, your employee yelled at me and blah, 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 I always tell them, I'll defend you, I'll get the story. But how do you do that with deliveries where they don't come to your building?
I think you did a great job.
Yeah, I think you did the right thing too.
Just don't deliver to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
And
you
she
got
can
90%
refuse,
of
like-
the guys that are okay, and then you got 10 that aren't. But
Yeah,
if
I mean, she knows where she's driving to before she goes there. She could say, I'm not going to deliver to this place. And if you honor that because, you know, what's coming.
Okay.
Okay. And then this is just like basically, just when you get to that point, I think the less you say, the better. I'm so sorry. You are no longer a good fit for our company. We are letting you go. And that's kind of, we've led up to everything. You're in the right setting. You have a witness, you have a plan to kind of leave the conversation. It's not a coaching conversation, and the less you say, the better. I found that, the more you say, or I've had a ton of employees where you let them go and they're like, why? And it's like, it's not the time to talk about it. I've made the decision. The decision has been made. You are no longer a good fit for our company, and just kind of stick to your guns, with that. One time I had this girl who worked for me. She was in high school and she kept getting her shifts covered, and I'd schedule her 3 days and she'd maybe work one of the days. And so she got to work and I pulled her into the office and I said, hey, I've decided to let you go. I just feel like you're not a good fit for Farrell's. And she's like, okay, do I need to work my shifts this weekend? And I was like, no, I've decided to let you go. And she's like, awesome. Okay, bye. And I was like, okay, bye, girl. Like, so weird. I'm so happy I could help you out by letting you go today. So sometimes people are just, they're ready to be let go. And then, my mom and I were talking about it, just this seminar where we were like, breaking up is hard to do. We're like, if you do your due diligence, if you communicate, if you coach, if you give them every opportunity to correct the behavior that's going to earn them their termination, breaking up shouldn't be hard to do. It should be something that and I hate to say it, like, you feel good about it, because you don't really feel good about ever terminating somebody, but you should feel like you did everything you could. You gave them every opportunity and they really truly earned their termination. And then, is that it?